The Washington Commanders wrapped their minicamp on Thursday with no further drama, but a pick six to send them into their pre-training camp break. Our final observations and some words from head coach Ron Rivera and some assistant coaches on this episode of the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, and we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And we thank you for making us your first listener, your first view of the day. And if you love the podcast, you're going to love this even more because now you can watch the Locked On Commanders podcast on the WUSA 9 Plus app. WUSA 9, your CBS affiliate in Washington, D.C., has a new streaming app that is a game changer for local news and sports in the DMV. Just download the WUSA 9 Plus app now from your Roku or Amazon Fire TV stick. I am David Harrison, covering the Commanders for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. My co-host Chris Russell, the Rooster, one half of the Russell and Medhurst show on the Team 980. Find Chris and Pete there Monday through Friday from 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern or anytime, along with this show on the Audacy app. When we're not there or here, we're on Twitter at DHarrison82, at WrestleMania621, and at LO Commanders.
All right. Thanks for making us, again, your first view or your first listen of the day. Today's episode, David, is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Commanders listeners and viewers, that's right, can get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings. Use the code Locked On at checkout. All right, David, you mentioned the Washington Commanders wrapping up minicamp today. We were both there once again in Ashburn. Now no more until the end of July, and we actually have information on training camp, which we'll get to in a sec. But wrapping up the offseason program, today was one of those weird days, I guess, for lack of a better term. It was a practice that was more like a rookie minicamp type practice, but not really because players were out there, but they weren't doing much in terms of the veterans. It was more designed for rookies, younger players. It was definitely a shorter practice. And, I got to be honest with you, they should have probably just canceled the whole thing.
The big draw for today, right, from a media aspect anyway, was the chance to talk to the assistant coaches, right? And it's not like they really shut the door on us talking to the assistant coaches, but they're walking off the field after practice. We're trying to get to kind of the scheduled press conferences, the players that are going to show up, and Ron Rivera, Scott Turner, Jack Del Rio, whoever's up at the podium that day, from the kind of the top level of the coaching staff. So today's really the first dedicated opportunity to talk to the assistant coaches. But I mean, we came in there, I think, looking for some specific things. We got to meet a group of student athlete leadership summit members. I think I said that correctly. I apologize to them if I didn't. But we got to meet some of them. You had some really good conversations about some of the student athletes from Virginia Tech that were on hand. So, I mean, a good day. I don't know that we gleaned a whole lot that we can pass on to Commanders fans from like a technical standpoint. But we did get some more observations, and specifically on some of the players who aren't there or aren't at least on the field practicing with their teammates. And the biggest one, of course, is going to be Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, and you're right. There was stuff surrounding the practice that was useful, and you'll hear from some of those things over the next week or two. But you mentioned Curtis Samuel, and again, nobody should be surprised by this. They are being extra beyond extra cautious. First of all, they have a new head athletic trainer, right? So, Ron has mentioned a couple of times that Al, thought like that we should just back him down. We should just take care. He's done a lot of good things. He's in a good spot. Here's the problem, David. I was encouraged by the fact that he participated Tuesday in one part of the team activities. Then you start to worry when he doesn't practice, not today, but yesterday, right? And last week he didn't practice. And while, again, at this time last year, he wasn't doing anything, he wasn't practicing at all. So while that has changed and while that is encouraging, you do have to have in the back of your mind, wait, how limited is this guy going to be, not only in training camp when it's every day, day after day after day, and of course they have days off, but also then during the season? Is he not going to be able to practice every Wednesday and every Thursday? Is it just going to be a Friday thing? Is he not going to be able to practice at all? I mean, these are the things that reasonably have to go through your mind. And if they don't go through your mind as a Commanders fan or you and I, you're crazy, because the evidence is there, and it's just documented. I'm sorry, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wrote about it from my day two notebook, observing the offense from minicamp yesterday or on Wednesday. And, the knee jerk reaction is just going to be to wonder if this is something more serious. And someone in the media pool even asked, Coach Rivera if this had to do with the groin. And Coach Rivera immediately said, no, it has nothing to do with the groin. It has everything to do with just being safe, protecting one of our assets. Look, you want to believe him, you really do. And I wouldn't sit here and call Coach Rivera a liar. So the kind of the gut instinct or the concerns growing don't come from not trusting Ron Rivera. They just come from the 1 year history of Curtis Samuel with the Washington Commanders. And I think that's just kind of a natural byproduct of
Right.
everything that went on last year. So yeah, when you don't see Curtis Samuel, with a helmet practicing on the field, I mean, he's on the field, but he's not running through the team drills
Right.
and all those things for one day, it automatically, boom, just brings up that kind of anxiety surrounding his situation. Then when you don't see it for 2 days in a row, yeah, the coach says it's an abundance of caution. I believe him. I just but the feeling inside is still nervousness. That's still the end result.
And I think that's the right attitude to have: apprehension, nervousness, an uneasy feeling, whatever you want. Just like it sort of kind of is, I guess. I don't know about Chase Young and Logan Thomas. I mean, I don't know about you. I didn't get the sense that they were going to be full go in any sort of way to start training camp. Now,
Right.
again, things could change. I didn't, Kyle Allen wasn't limited last year officially in terms of a designation at the start, and yet he was. So,
Yeah.
I mean, designations can mean one thing, can mean another thing. I wouldn't be shocked if either or both of those guys open up on preseason pup to give them a little extra flexibility. The problem is, if you're on preseason pup, you can't practice at all. You can
Right.
work on the side fields, but you can't practice. So you really kind of get behind. But those are, that along with, I guess, whatever's going on with Charles Leno. And I don't know if we got any real clarification with that, or some of the big injury concerns, questions, storylines as we head into this 5.5 week break.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we didn't. I mean, we didn't really get anything solid, and to be fair, the team doesn't have to give us anything
Yep.
solid. That's kind of the advantage
Yep.
they have at this time of year is they don't need to unveil anything more than they want to unveil, and that includes Dax Milne, who I came in
Yep.
Thursday looking to see him specifically because he wasn't practicing Wednesday, and at the end of practice, Ron kind of said, some guys were sick and all these other things. I noticed very early on Thursday that Dax Milne wasn't out on the field. At least I couldn't find him, so I said, "Oh, he must still be sick." And then by the time I did spot him, he was wearing a boot on his
Yep.
leg. Now,
We did
Coach Rivera
notice.
did say that Dak should be out of that boot before training camp. So that's kind of the one definitive I think that we really did get, which is good because, he's a guy that, you don't expect him to be like the number 3 guy or anything like that, but you want to get as many receivers, as many reps, and as comfortable with Carson Wentz as you can because regardless of, holdout situations with Terry McLaurin, which we're going to talk about here in a minute in segment 2, but regardless of those things, just the NFL is a game. It's a league of attrition. Football is a game of attrition. Whoever is healthiest at the end and has the most contributors healthy usually ends up, playing for the big game. You look at the Cincinnati Bengals. One of the reasons they led the AFC into the Super Bowl was because they were one of the healthiest squads in the AFC at the most important time. So you want Dax to heal up, whatever it is that's ailing him, which apparently he will, so he can be back on the field in training camp in case he's looked at to step up in a more significant role during the season.
Well, and more importantly, he'll be probably the primary or in pencil punt returner
Yeah.
and maybe
Yep.
more. So, it's something I talked with Nate Katzer, the special teams coordinator, after the practice with. You'll hear that conversation coming up in the ensuing episodes of the Locked On Commanders podcast. All right, so that's the latest on the injury front. David, when we return, we're going to get a big picture takeaway on both sides of the ball from each one of us and discuss after the Commanders locked up mini camp right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Yeah, we're going to do so thanks to BlueNile.com. You can celebrate all of life's special moments, from creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams to gifting a classic and timeless jewelry piece, all at prices you won't find at a traditional jeweler. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Build the engagement ring of her dreams or celebrate life's special moments with fine jewelry. No matter what you're looking for, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Commanders, you get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings. So again, use the promo code Locked On at BlueNile.com. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today.
All right, thanks for making the Locked On Commanders podcast, again, your first listen and view of the day. So, guys, we have an important favor to ask of you. We put together a survey so we can learn more about listeners like yourself and viewers. Make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. That's right. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like, don't like about the Locked On podcast network. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long. And everyone that completes a survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. And thanks for your help. Thanks for watching and listening. All right, David, big picture takeaways. Now that the offseason program is over, look, we, of course, start with, of course, first of all, no major new injuries. That's good. Nobody tore up their ACL or anything like that. That's number one. The other big picture takeaway is we didn't see Terry McLaurin at all. I really thought he was going to be at one point out here for at least on the sideline, at least in the building, and he wasn't. And that is, I mean, it has to be a concern no matter what they say, that they're not going to trade him, that they're started it earlier, all that. That is a looming black cloud over the football operations of a franchise that really, the football operation is about the only thing that's normal, quite honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about that real quick. We got a question in the live chat here. Lucas Manatos. Hopefully I said that correctly. Forgive me if I didn't. Is there a chance that we trade Terry McLaurin this year? Of course, talking about the Washington Commanders potentially trading their star receiver. I would say no, just because if you trade him, and I saw there was kind of some conjecture out there, an idea like maybe Washington trades Terry McLaurin straight up for Deebo Samuel in the San Francisco 49ers, something like that. The problem is Deebo wants a new contract as well.
Yes.
And Deebo's contract demands are probably most likely higher than Terry McLaurin. And I don't want to say that Deebo and Curtis Samuel are the same player, but they kind of bring the same flavor to the field. I mean, Deebo probably is a little bit better at it, granted, you know what I mean? But Curtis Samuel and Deebo kind of fit the same role, whereas Terry McLaurin is kind of more your X receiver for this offense right now and all those things. So, there's really not a good trade scenario here for the team. And let's be honest, Terry, we talked about this during the offseason. He's one of your quietest players, one of your most professional players on the surface. He's a team leader, he's a captain. Like, this is the kind of player, when you're a franchise like the Washington Commanders, you need this guy on your roster.
Yeah, unless there's a Mike linebacker or somebody that is so good, so outstanding, and so available, I just don't see a fit at another position group that would match up. To your point, the whole Deebo Samuel. I don't like Deebo Samuel wants to be a pure wide receiver, and he's not. And he wants to get paid like a pure wide receiver, and quite honestly, he's not. If I'm going to pay anybody, it's Terry McLaurin, period. That's it. That's where that argument ends, with A.J. Brown off the market, with Devontae Adams off the market, with Tyreek Hill off the market. I mean, of course, there are other guys, but you get, the sense. Cooper Kupp, same thing. I would just quickly add this. The narrative going forward is going to be, Ron Rivera came out and said, "Hey, we started everything early. We're working on it. Everything's good. We're not going to trade him." Just remember, I don't think Ron's lying, but just remember, Ron has said plenty of things. And every NFL coach, David, that you've probably covered, and every NFL coach that I know I've covered, from Mike Shanahan to Jay Gruden and Jim Zorn and everyone in between, They all say what they need to say when they need to say it.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes they say things that they don't need to say, period, as
Mhm.
we found out last week. But my point being is just because they say it doesn't mean that will ultimately be the truth and the reality. It is something they are trying to say to calm the flames down and to keep the narrative focused on fans and media not panicking. So that is a big storyline for us, obviously, to watch. I don't expect anything to happen anytime soon. Maybe right before training camp. Hopefully, we will see as we turn the clock towards the end of July. But David, just in wrapping up again the OTA period and the offseason, like looking at one big picture takeaway that I had from the offense without Terry McLaurin there, I really like how this running back group is coming along.
Mhm.
Of course, we know what Antonio Gibson is, and hopefully he'll be able to keep, ball control better. And JD McKissick is healthy once again and came back.
Right.
I'm really excited about Brian Robinson, and I'm also excited about Jonathan Williams, number 41, who I think is going to absolutely give Jared Patterson
Yeah.
every ounce of battle for that final probably roster spot for the running backs, assuming that they keep 4 on
Yeah.
the initial 53, which I think they will. I'm really excited about the running back group as a whole.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that very easily as well. Very excited to see what Brian Robinson has to do as well. I'm sure that I'll be talking about that very soon as well here later on today. My offensive observations at the quarterback upgrade is very clear, and it was definitely very very needed. Carson Wentz a clear upgrade from Taylor Heineke. I know we've kind of said this throughout the offseason, throughout the practices that we've seen, but just to kind of drive home that point because again, you were talking to those Virginia Tech student athletes, and one of them asked you, if it wasn't, if it wasn't for the money or the conversation you guys were having, if it wasn't for the money difference, Taylor acknowledged that himself. You're not going to pay a guy almost $30 million and have him back up a guy getting paid $2 million. It's just not going to happen. But I kind of made the point in that conversation that even without the money, even if they're both making 28 million or if they're both making 2 million, Carson Wentz is by far the better quarterback, and that brings us kind of to that quarterback conversation and any potential battles. To me, Chris, if there is a battle, it's for the second quarterback spot. Now,
Mhm.
here's the thing: Sam Howell, we've seen him look really good, really clean at training camp. At times, make some really good throws, really good decisions. We've also seen him look like a rookie and throw some passes where you go, Sam, what are you doing? What
Yeah.
did you even see? But the grain of salt that needs to be taken here is Carson Wentz said it himself when he talked to us right during the mandatory minicamp. This playbook, very wordy, probably the wordiest playbook that he's ever had in his quarterback life. Sam Howell not only is having to adjust to that, but also adjust to the pro game, taking snaps from under center, all these things. And he's got one of the wordiest playbooks in the National Football League. So it's not a negative. That's the growing pains that he's going to go through. I think from a talent standpoint, though, Sam Howell has to be your number 2 quarterback from that standpoint. The only thing keeping him from number 2 on the depth chart is going to be the experience of the playbook, the knowledge of the pro football game, the NFL game that Taylor obviously has over him. That's why Sam will be number 3. But we've seen the flashes of talent you need to see. Now Sam's just got to get caught up, and that's only going to come with time. There's nothing he can truly do to accelerate that.
Right. So Ryan Lynn, who's listening and watching along with us live here, asked that that basic question. So I think you summarized it pretty well. I would say I was a little higher on Sam Howell earlier in camp than I was, or in the offseason than I was the last couple of practices. Certainly, some things that you didn't love, or I didn't love, I should say. And I talked to Ken Zampese, the quarterbacks coach, afterwards, and he said a lot of the same things that Sam himself told us on Wednesday and that you just said. So at the risk of not repeating, he just said it's got to slow down. If you think about, right, going from college to the NFL is a big transition anyway for every player. Every young player Jamin Davis talked about how, the game, it just slows down and then you can react quicker. Cam Curl talked about that with us this week. Well, again, for the quarterbacks, it's the same thing, only magnified times probably 10 or 50 or whatever it might be, because Sam's trying to get used to everything. And sure, while he was a productive college quarterback, and sure, while he's got a relationship with De'Ami Brown, he's got a lot of other things he's dealing with. And the one thing I will also point out, for true for every quarterback, when you're not getting hit and there's no fear of getting hit, and you're still kind of struggling and maybe not really sharp and really crisp, that's something that worries me a little bit. And that's something that I need to see more of before I'm ready to anoint Sam Howell the new king of Ashburn. So we will see more on that as training camp obviously goes along. All right, we'll come back and we'll wrap things up with a thought on the defense and as well the training camp schedule, which the team has put out right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast. But first, David and I here to tell you guys, as always, about our friends at betonline.net. They are your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find out all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship, which could be over on Thursday night between Boston and Golden State, the NHL Cup final. David, I probably put down about $175 total worth of bets on the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Colorado Avalanche on both sides to cover me. I put down some big action before Wednesday night's game one, thanks to our friends at BetOnline. And you can too. Major League Baseball, of course, fighting news, MMA, UFC. You got the U.S. Open going on this weekend, and golf. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, one last segment here on the Locked On Commanders podcast to wrap up our minicamp coverage. Well, wrap up our day of minicamp coverage. We've got plenty coming from what the coaches said and what we saw from the minicamp between now and training camp at the end of July. We've got some training camp news we'll get to here in a minute. But first, Chris, let's talk about our defensive takeaway from this minicamp. And my defensive takeaway from the minicamp is going to be this. Like it or not, regardless of what we think, Jamin Davis is a starting linebacker on this team. Cole Holcomb is obviously the Mike. He's the number one kind of off-ball linebacker, but Jamin Davis is number two. Again, early on in the OTAs, it looked like there was a little bit of swapping going on between he and David Mayo, but really here, especially during the minicamp, Jamin Davis running with the ones exclusively, David Mayo running with the twos, setting the defense actually with the twos as a Mike linebacker. So if you want to call him Cole Holcomb's direct backup, I don't know that it really matters the classification you really give it, but anybody who basically is kind of down on Jamin, already giving him maybe the bust label. Look, first of all, personally, 1 year is way too soon to call anybody a bust. Year two, even, I would say, is way too early to call somebody a bust. But you're going to see plenty of Jamin Davis, saving injury, obviously, in year two.
I don't get the absolute. I don't know what the right term is. Disappointment, I guess, in Jamin Davis because things didn't go great last year. Listen, I understand y'all wanted him to be the next Luke Kuechly. I got it. They wanted that. I'm sure he wanted that. Yeah. You all fans wanted that. I get that part was kind of disappointing, but I would say concentrate on a couple of the flash plays, and there were 6 or 7 flash plays that he made. That we both saw and that we've talked about. And I know I saw several times in person, and I talked to him about it, a couple of chances that we had last year through Zoom and all that stuff. Like Jamin, I think, is going to be fine. He needs to do less thinking, more reacting, more athleticism, more playing. And I think not being at the mic and having Cole Holcomb and, like you said, David Mayo there will help him. And also, again, don't expect him to play 65 snaps a game. Maybe we just need to readjust our compass a little bit and say, okay, take a big step forward. Then we'll continue to look at ways that we can maybe get you back to Mike as you get more experience and as the game really slows down. The other really encouraging sign, David, in training in the offseason program is Benjamin St-Juste. I mean, the coaches, every chance they get, they talk about how well he has played from the slot. You and I have seen it. We saw him turn around Jahan Dotson a little bit yesterday on Wednesday in the end zone. Maybe it wasn't the greatest throw in the world, so it wasn't really Jahan's fault, but he was right on his hip. Benjamin St-Juste is a guy at 6'2.5", 215, 220 or whatever. I got to be honest with you, I did not see him in the slot. They see him in the slot. They've worked him in the slot, and he's looked good in the slot. David, I'm still floored by this change, and it's a good thing, and that's why I'm also not a football coach and why you're stuck with me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I love Benjamin St-Juste, I do, but he's an outside defender. You remember going back to when he was drafted, even before the draft that last year, when we were talking about him out of the Senior Bowl. I thought he could be a guy that transitions to maybe free safety because he's got the length, he's got some long speed and all that stuff. Slot, not really a guy that I saw going in there because typically you want your slot guy to be a little shiftier, short area quickness is really something that you usually value. He's a little bit longer, a little bit stiffer than your typical slot defender. But the coaches say that he's taken to it pretty well. He's doing fairly well. I mean, I can say that in practice, he hasn't looked completely, like a fish out of water. Or, they're not just, quarterbacks aren't just going out there and picking on him or anything like that. But we'll have to continue to see how that develops. We got another question real quick from Ryan before we get to this training camp information. Asking about Brooks and Davis Jr. Both were here for rookie camps as tryout players. Neither here anymore on the roster for OTAs, and I don't expect either of them to be back for training camp. I know Brooks, he's the son of Derek Brooks, legendary Buccaneers linebacker. A lot of legendary Buccaneers defenders coming up in conversations this week, but he actually ended up in Tampa during their OTAs and minicamp. I don't believe he's being retained, but I could be wrong on that. But no, I don't expect them to be on the roster among the three that Ron Rivera basically said he loves on the roster right now. You're muted, Chris. Chris, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, David. The training camp information that we were mentioning, that is training camp will open up on July 27th, conclude on August 18th. Here's the big thing you need to know. Saturday night, August 6th at FedEx Field, much like last year, although it was on a Friday night last year, there'll be a free practice event at FedEx with free tickets, free parking, all of that stuff. And you guys can attend that. All the information, of course, on the Commanders official website, and there will be public practices at Commanders headquarters in Ashburn through a lottery system. But that's the big news. And no Richmond, Virginia on the training camp schedule for 2022, which probably isn't a surprise given how things are working in the Commonwealth right now. And being that, of course, they're not under contract. Last year's 4 or 5 day stint down in Richmond was maybe like a good faith, goodwill effort. And it didn't really exactly work out that way, at least for now. All right, that is going to do it for us on this edition of the Locked On Commanders podcast. Thanks again for making LOC your first listen and your first view of the day. The first picks of the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft have been made. Search now for the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and get over 50 insiders, the Audacy sports experts, the draft experts of Locked On NBA's Big Board. The 5-episode Ultimate NBA Mock Draft is underway. Make Ultimate NBA Mock Draft your second listen and watch today. We'll be back after the Father's Day and Juneteenth weekend. So for all you dads out there, thank you for all you do and have a great one. David, happy Father's Day, of course, to you. If you want to hop in, lockedonwashingtoncommanders@gmail.com or the voicemail, 301-615-3577, 301-615-3577 for David Harrison, who is covering the Washington Commanders for SI.com's Fan Nation. I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst show on the Team 980 and the Audacy app. If you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another. Thank you for joining us right here, and happy Father's Day weekend on the... I went a little fast there. Locked On Commanders podcast.